As congregation and minister, we have been apart for a time, but now are together again.
I have returned from travels through land and through spirit, seeking rest and a new beginning.
We, though, remaining here, have also traveled through new dimensions of self-discovery and new beginning.
The time has been good to us. We began this time with needs felt but not fully known. Apart, we have learned new truths about ourselves.
Apart, we have learned new truths about ourselves.
Truths that make us more securely who we are.
Truths that make us more valuable to one another. We come together again now.
We begin a new shared adventure. The adventure of keeping the old that was good between us.
The adventure of sharing the new we singly have discovered.
The adventure of finding still newer ways that shall fulfill us and inspire our being together. It has been good to have had ourselves to ourselves.
It shall be better still to be a congregation and minister, rejoined in a common pursuit of the Spirit. Welcome home.
And welcome home.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of a lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness and heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
To love life is to notice the wonders that abound, and to notice the wonders that abound is to be grounded here and now. And to be grounded here and now is the beginning of finding love for this life today. Let us ground ourselves in this instant in the worship of all things good and right. Come, let us worship together.
The light of hope is shone. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve life in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each and with all.
Friends, as I announced earlier this week, our dear member and friend Helen Finney died early last Sunday morning. She died after a stay in hospice for pancreatic cancer. Her husband Henry and her children were with her. A memorial service and celebration of Helen's life among us will happen sometime in the near future, and we will communicate with you more as we put things together. But now, as is our tradition, I light our candle of life in memory of Helen Finney. After recording our candle of life this week, we learned of the death of our beloved Minister Emeritus, Dale Arnink. I want to acknowledge that this week, and we will light our candle of life for Dale in next Sunday's service. Let us be with one another in a moment of silence. Let us be together in a moment of prayer and reflection. Let us contemplate the Spirit together, Spirit of life and love, of justice and peace. Day in and day out, weight weary tasks, burdens we lift again, worn paths that we wear some more, want and means worn thin, and fatigue. Pain and grief, coldness of heart, bitter and weary days where we know desolation. How do we call forth hope? When our hearts are buried, sunken down, how do we dig out and rise up? What healing touch do we long for? What balm might we take and share? Come what may, O Spirit of life, may we keep a ray of light for our inward path. A living water in the depths of us, a cleansing breath at our core. May we keep them for ourselves and to share. May we call forth from each other vitality and tenacity. May love rest in us. May justice live through us. May we have the touch to call others back to life and love, to justice and peace. May we sing back their songs and add the Alleluias. All this we pray in the names of those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten, in the names of all the helpers of humankind. Amen.
Day is a breaking,
in my soul. Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? They are sowing seeds of gladness. Days a breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear fathers? Oh, where are our dear fathers? They are in the fields a-plowing. Days a-breaking in my soul. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Days a-breaking in my soul.
Sustaining the Tree of Life by Gardner. The tree stood in the middle of the village. Its trunk was so large that it took 6 people holding hands to reach around it. The roots were strong and wide, and its branches spread out over the village square, offering shelter from the rain or shade from the summer sun. Its fruit was juicy, sweet, and plentiful. The people of the village loved the tree. Children played beneath it and climbed its lowest branches. Young people knew that if you whispered your dreams to the tree, they were more likely to come true. People who proclaimed their love or friendship for one another beneath its branches found their relationships to be nourishing. And elders discovered that their sweetest memories could be counted on when they were near the great tree. The tree had been witness to so much, and when the breezes blew through the leaves, one could hear echoes of generations, laughter, conversations, dreams, prayers, and songs. Animals loved the tree too. Rabbits lived in burrows under the roots. Squirrels and monkeys lived in the branches, and bats and birds flew in to eat the abundant fruit. The tree seemed to buzz with life. One day, a traveling merchant arrived in the village. He rested in the shade and ate 2 pieces of delicious fruit. "This fruit is incredible," he said. "I would like to have some to sell in the next villages that I visit. Who owns this tree?" "No one owns this tree," replied a villager. "If anything, we belong to it." "Well then, if no one owns the tree, then no one will mind if I pick the fruit," said the merchant, and began to fill a basket. "I mind," said the villager, "and today I am keeper of the tree." "What do you mean, keeper of the tree?" "We each take our turn being here with the tree. We could never own it. We are here as protectors and sustainers." "That's ridiculous. The tree doesn't need you. You could just take what you need, take what you want. The tree will continue. But the villager couldn't be persuaded. Sir, this tree isn't like that. We don't come here to take from it, even though we receive much. We are keepers of the tree because this is where we are nourished. This is where some of our most precious memories are, and where our people have dreamed. This is where we remember who we want to become. Well, said the merchant, you may think this tree is very special, but it still doesn't need you to sit with it. That is preposterous. Ah, replied the villager, the tree itself may not need me, but what of others who come by? Just this morning, I sat with a woman whose heart was heavy with worry. Had I not been here, she would have had to carry that weight alone. And this afternoon, a tired couple came by, and they rested with me. They said they had been looking for a place like this. And then an elder came by, and we watched the birds in the branches together. And now here you are. You are confused about what the tree is and how to be with it. Imagine if you had arrived and not found anyone here to talk with. You might have continued thinking that everything you do is all about you. Luckily for you, my friend, I'm here to let you know that when you care for the tree of life, it becomes about so much more than just you. And the merchant sat for a while in the shade, thinking about these ideas that felt new and a little challenging. As the sun went down, he picked up his bag and headed out of town, whistling a song that he hadn't thought of in years. On his way, he shared a smile with each person he met, his heart feeling strangely light and joyful. And the people of the village? They continued to sustain the tree of life, to care for one another and to share their gifts with grace and gratitude. May it be so for each of us. Our reading this morning comes to us from my friend and colleague, the Reverend Heather Janulis, from a sermon of hers. I have often quoted a colleague who would say to members of the congregation he served, "It seems like life is coming at you in bulk," as they met in his office to reflect on the members' personal challenges. How often do we find ourselves or someone we love in this state of painful abundance, swimming in situations and problems that only compound one another? In these times, the emptiness of the saying, "God doesn't give you more than you can handle," becomes readily apparent. It is easy to feel grateful in times of abundance, in times of abundant stability and joy. The spiritual challenge is to find gratitude in times when, to be honest, we can't handle the life that is emerging before us. The challenge is to be present to the things that make us afraid or depleted or feel hurt, and to find the gifts in those things too. So now it's time to find out if I remember how to do all of this. It's been a little while. I am so happy to be back with you all after my sabbatical. I am so grateful to you all for allowing me this long overdue extended time to get myself in order and get my ministry in order, because that's what I needed. I was in deep need of just reorganizing what I was doing with my life, because before I left, after a year and a half of pandemic ministry, after a year and a half of doing remote services and turning into a television producer instead of a preacher necessarily, before I left at the end of May, I was tired. I was feeling so much despair for how things were going, and I was unfocused in my work, and I was feeling anxious all the time about getting things done and serving you well, and I was feeling defeated on the inside in my own assessment of how I was doing at that point. And really, I was uncertain of what my calling was anymore. Uncertain of what it meant to be a minister in these times. My colleagues and I would talk constantly about how none of us were trained to do what we had been doing throughout the pandemic. And the creation of videos took up so much time that it took away time to do some of the other work of ministry that I enjoyed. And then I started watching colleagues of mine and friends leave their churches, walk away from the ministry completely. It was not a great atmosphere to be serving a call at the time. And what I needed, what I expressed needing, was rest and some time to rediscover what the call meant for the future. But in watching everything that was going on, what my animal desire was, and what I might not have been speaking up, was just run. Escape. Get out of it. It was not a good place to be. All I knew at that point is I needed to spend some time just not being a minister. And in the lead up, people would ask me, what are your plans, John? What are you going to do on your sabbatical? And I had a different answer every time. The answer was, all the plans. I have all of the plans. I'm going to do everything I've ever wanted to do, somehow compressed into this 5-month span. But you and I know both, even though I couldn't admit it to myself at the time, that when you have all of the plans, you really have no plan at all. And that's what I was facing, and not being able to admit to myself on the inside. So by the end, as we approached the beginning of sabbatical and people asked me what my plans were, I would just say, I think if I just take a 5-month-long nap, it'll probably be the best thing I could do for myself and everyone else. And friends, for the first month, for the month of June, that is pretty much what I did. Now, I'd only been joking about the 5-month-long nap, but my body had other plans as soon as I stepped away. I slept more in that month than I have in over a year. I slept late. I took naps. I listened to what my physical self was telling me about what I needed, and I took a lot of rest, more than I ever expected. And then by July, I was itching to do something because John loves a project. They're easy to get a handle on. And so I started remodeling my home office space. It had been living in a transition between my son's old bedroom and my workspace for 6 or 7 years. And so I finally cleared everything out and repainted and got things on the wall the way that I wanted it and made it a space that I would want to work from and Zoom from and be in and be creative in. And so I got that done. I finished that project. And then August rolled around. And I had rested a bunch, and I had done my project. And then I looked at all the plans and got to a point where I couldn't pick just one. There was too much, and so I did nothing, and I started to feel a little lost in that moment. What about all my plans? Why am I not doing anything? What is wrong with me that I can't seem to work up any motivation to do or be? And then the Delta variant arrived and the infection spikes went up even here in this community, and I learned that you all went back to completely virtual services, and I just dropped down into that despair again. And around the middle of the month, right on my birthday exactly, a great day for this to happen, I had a complete breakdown. I just emotionally fell apart. Now, I didn't know what my plans really were, but I do know that completely falling apart was not one of the plans that I had for the sabbatical, because, I had it together. I was in good shape, right? But no, I was falling down this spiral and just living in the bottom of it. convincing myself in this internal dialogue that I hadn't done enough and I wasn't doing enough, and therefore I wasn't worthy enough to be among people, and I wasn't loved enough because I wasn't doing enough, and that I was now and would be forever letting everybody down. Which is not true. I mean, I know intellectually in my head that is absolutely not true, but that, folks, is how my brain works. I've joked with you before about being the king of the worst case scenario, and sometimes it is amusing to observe myself doing that, but the reality is, the part that's not a joke, and the part that I have struggled with for a long time, is that when I get into these spirals, when I start thinking about how things can go wrong and be bad, I cast myself into a pit. I fall right down into a hell of my own making, and I set up house there. And that's what I was doing now. In the middle of rest and renewal, that's where I was starting to live, and that's really where I had been living for a long time. And there was something in there that is deeply rooted and seated and needed to be addressed. But this time, rather than wallowing in the despair and living in that hell for too long, this time the words that feed my moral compass popped up in my head. It's a simple phrase, and it's one that guides me. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And so I got out of bed. I walked into the living room and I sat down and I just let the breakdown happen with someone I love and I trust. And I was able to say for the first time out loud, I don't know what's wrong. I'm just sad and angry all the time. And there it was, out in the open, right there on the table. The reality of my depression that I was ignoring and could not acknowledge. There's a concept in improvisation, a platitude, we say. Everything we need to complete the scene is right there in front of us. Meaning we all know what we need to do. Somewhere in the midst of all our intelligences is everything we need to do to move a scene forward. We just have to accept what has been offered to us to build upon it. Now these are easy concepts when you're doing improvisation and the stakes are very, very low to non-existent. You can accept any ridiculous reality that's being created on a stage. You can take what you know and build upon that. But when the scene is your own life and the reality that is being offered isn't something you want to accept, isn't something you want to build on necessarily, the platitudes seem like platitudes and not easy to work with. My colleague Heather Janulis, in the reading I shared with you today, talks about life coming at you in bulk. And that is certainly what I was feeling in that moment, and honestly what I had been feeling for months and months at that point. And it's easy, she says, to feel grateful in times of abundant stability and joy, but the challenge is to be present to the things that make us afraid or depleted or feel hurt. To find the gifts in those things too. And deep down, that's the thing about acceptance and building upon things, building upon a reality in improvisation too. The yes that we talk about, that's an act of gratitude. for what is there to be worked with. No matter how joyful, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how painful the reality that is in front of us might be. And to being able to speak that reality finally, to have someone else in the room while I spoke it, to be able to offer it to myself finally. I was able to find a sense of gratitude because now what I was struggling with had a name. And I found within that the courage to deal with what I needed to deal with, to accept what is in front of me and build upon it. Everything I needed was right in front of me. And so I went out and got the good antidepressants. And I went out and found myself a therapist who specializes in working with clergy. And it's a long road to deal with everything I've been dealing with, but those changes alone have made a huge difference in just the last few months for me. That I was able to start thinking again about what it meant to be called to be a minister. I hadn't been actively thinking about it up until that point. And right now I was just relearning how to be kind and compassionate to my own self, because that's a project. And then the 20th anniversary of 9/11 hit. And I found myself living in this wave of, I don't want to call it nostalgia, but I don't know a better word for it at this point, memory. Remembering where I was at that time and how it affected me and what I was doing and how that was one of the factors that opened me up into that call to ministry. There were realities I was looking at in the world that I needed to address, that I couldn't live with, that the voice in me said it didn't have to be this way. I looked around in the wake of 9/11 and saw this fierce individualism that closed people off from one another and created selfishness and hatred and division. And I saw that individualism leading into a disconnection among people and among peoples. And we were leaning into that hard, eventually creating this atmosphere of mistrust, one person to another, one group to another, and eventually a very false and narrow sense of patriotism, of what it meant to be an American and who got to be in that club. And we as a people turned to these knee-jerk autonomic responses of hatred and mistrust. And the voice in my head said, it doesn't have to be this way, and I don't have to allow it to be this way. I can live differently. I don't have to live into that. I can live differently in front of people. And that's not the whole story of my call to ministry, but it is a big part of it. And those realities on the ground 20 years ago are even more the reality on the ground right now. We talk so much about my rights and my freedoms over and above what any of us might need to share or do to take care of one another. And we are still deeply divided in this us versus them mentality, one that especially still creates that false sense of patriotism, that false sense of what it means to be American here in our country. A definition of us that leaves out most of us. I realized I hadn't lost my sense of call over the last few years. I had just forgotten what the roots were. I hadn't stayed grounded in it. And I realized then, yes, I still want to be a minister. I want to be a minister for the same reasons I wanted to be a minister 20 years ago. Because if I can build a community that moves us towards something bigger than any of us, that pulls us out of our navel gazing and into a true sense of community, then yes, I still want to be a minister. And if I can build a community that helps to shine the light and hold on to connections that have been lost or let go of amidst the division and the hatred and the misunderstanding in our world, then yes, I still want to be a minister. And if I can help to create a community built on the sense that it doesn't have to be this way, and that tries to live in new and better ways and live them in a public way, to show the whole community it does not have to be this way, then yes, I still want to be a minister. And furthermore, added on to what I've learned in the last several months about myself, if I can continue to learn and to struggle with being kind to myself and compassionate to myself, and I can pass those lessons on, and I can be a mirror and a listening post to you in your own quest for kindness and compassion to yourself, then yes, I still want to be a minister. And if I can be a companion to you all in the times when life is coming at you in bulk, help us sift through the reality at hand so that we can find the moments of gratitude in the chaos and the pain that we might be facing, then yes, I still want to be a minister. And this is my commitment now, coming back to you. This is my commitment to my ministry, to my calling, and to my work among you. I still want to be the minister I wanted to be 20 years ago, and more so now. None of these were the answers that I wanted. But in truth, 5 months ago, I don't think I was even sure what I wanted. But in having the time to listen to myself, to accept the reality in front of me, I got what I needed. And what I need to do is minister among you. I'm ready to begin again. I hope you're ready to begin again with me. May it be so. For the month of November, 100% of our weekly offering will be given to our friends at the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. The UUSC advances human rights and social justice around the world, partnering with those who confront unjust power structures and mobilizing to challenge oppressive policies. Their work is grounded in the belief that all people have inherent power and dignity. Please use the Givelify app on your mobile device to make your donation, or use the link in the service notes below. May what you give bring you joy. Friends, may life bless us and keep us. May the light of life shine upon us and out from within us and be gracious to us and bring us peace. For this is the day. This is the one wild and precious life we have been given. So let us all find a way to rejoice and be glad in it. Go in peace.